Are you looking for a new cinematic universe to follow now that the MCU has been put on hold? Are the DCEU movies just not doing it for you anymore? Did you know there's another place to follow your favorite DC characters? This is the DCAMU, DC Animated Movie Universe. There are 14, yes, you heard me right, 14 unique movies that have an array of DC characters spread throughout them that continue one narrative which will culminate in the upcoming Justice League Dark Apokolips War. Now that you know what to do, don't waste any time. Go on those interwebs and start streaming. Sponsored by Local Touch Online, a free online magazine that has an exclusive article by Pop Culture Geekery every month. Hello there, sir. Clark Kent here from the Daily Planet. I see you're a Superman fan. Just a few questions. What do you know about the Big Blue Boy Scout?
Well, he is the greatest superhero of all time, and he's from Metropolis, and he's the Man of Steel.
Greatest superhero. Yeah, I really appreciate. I mean, I'm sure he appreciates that. That's a really nice compliment, sir. What do you think makes him so great?
Just everything he stands for. He always looks out for the little guy. He stands for truth, justice, and I believe still the American way. I don't know if that's changed.
Yeah, I do still stand. I mean, I'm sure he still stands for that too. So, but yeah, it looks like you've got a lot of merchandise there. So kind of a fan, I assume.
Oh, biggest fan ever.
Let's see. How big of a fan would you say you are?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, 100.
Very nice, very nice. Well, I appreciate all the residual income. I mean, I'm sure he appreciates all the residual income from all the, the deals that he makes and stuff. But what's that piece that you have on your wall way back there?
Oh, let's see that piece right there. Oh, I got that one at a convention where he was at, and I was gonna get him to autograph it, but he had to leave. I think I saw you there after. Anyways, I got that one. Award. Oh no, no, this is that's what the sign is, and the autograph. But then this other guy came in.
Roy, can you hear me?
Oh, hey.
Who are you talking to?
Myself, apparently.
I'm starting to worry about you. I mean, I know this has been a long countdown, but and we're all in quarantine, and but sure, you're okay over there. I mean, I can send you a edible arrangement or something. I'm sure the fiber awesome. Will do good. So, all right, ready to do? Let's see, where we on part 6 of our countdown.
Yes, let's do this.
All right. So we got a couple of really good ones here that I know for me hold a lot of significance in my history with comics, and I'm sure they do for you the same. So I'll be curious as we talk about them, kind of pepper in some little stories as to why these are so important for us. So the first one we're going to go over, which you actually scolded me for on Facebook, is the death of Superman.
Yeah,
I kind of messaged late last night telling me that I suck.
Yeah.
But so this one, of course, is modeled after the famous story arc, The Death of Superman. And for me, this one came along right before I really got serious about comic collecting. So that's what's pretty special about it for me. Like I probably missed it by just a few months, because by the time I started visiting, shops that had it, it was already like way too expensive for me to even try to get, especially being, I think I was in high school at the time. Basically didn't have the income to pay for that. So
Oh yeah, yeah, and I
so
remember. Yeah, I remember when when it came out. It was like there were so many variants of it. I mean, you had the black bag sealed with the red logo with the blood on it. Yeah, I mean, there was just a ton of merchandise on this one. I mean, they really marketed this with the intent to kill Superman. At least that's what the original concept was.
yeah, I remember one of my friends, he had that one, the black bag. Um, and then I think I might have gotten a reprint of it, which I know is a bad word in comic collecting. Second print,
I'll do you one better. I got the graphic novel. Like I had to. That's the only way I got this. I think was in that. I think I saw them like kind of like you. I came in kind of late on these two, and it's kind of funny because now we're so used to everything being like I don't want to say spoiled, but we well known, well documented way before the event. Whereas back then, it was kind of like, what's going on? I think I even heard about this on the news of all places when it originally came out, and then that's kind of what I was like, oh wow, because I didn't really hang around a lot of people that collected, so I was just like, what's going on? And yeah, next thing I know, I go there, and the comics, like you said, were super expensive, and or you just couldn't get them. Like you could possibly order a second print or something like that, but I just remember going in, the same thing. They had them all on the walls, just covered everywhere, and the stores were packed with people. The comic book shops and like at the mall and stuff, they were packed with people just buying up anything and everything to get their hands on about this.
Yeah, and that is true. I do remember it being on the news. I mean, it was a big deal. It's like it was one of those things, that they hyped it up, and unfortunately, it's probably the last time that something like that was going to be such a big deal because they've kind of cheapened death in comics since then.
Yeah,
But
that's just a pretty big milestone.
yeah, so it was a cool time to be a collector and to see all that. So like a lot of the other ones that we've covered, this one is a massive story that I honestly thought they were going to do 3 movies. When they announced this one and then Reign of Superman, I thought they were going to do like a Superman Returns or something. Something like that for a third one, because there's a lot to pack into these 2 movies.
Yeah,
as far as storyline. Um, but I think they do a good job. They definitely do. I know we keep ragging on that original one called Superman Doomsday, but that one just should have never been made. It should have just waited until this. And the funny thing is, I remember watching this one with you. It had just come out, and you had it, and we watched it together. And I remember back then just thinking it was okay, and I think it's a testament to what you mentioned in the last episode, that when you watch these in succession, you actually appreciate these characters more. And guess what, DCEU? They didn't kill this Superman in the second movie that he appeared in, so I actually cared about this Superman when he died. So.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I remember when I watched it the first time with you, and to be quite honest, I don't really remember it, but I kind of do now because the one thing I remember about it the most was that I remember being almost bored the first time I watched it, at least the first half of the movie. And I was just, and I didn't know why. I was like, maybe I was sleepy, but no, I was just bored. But this time around, like you said, I guess because I've been watching it all these, along with you. Yeah, I was just like, oh, this is, I don't know why I fell asleep or whatever the first time, but I really did enjoy this. Maybe because I was more involved with the characters, like you said. But yeah, no, I was really looking forward to this one when you sent me the reminder. Hey, we're watching this one. I was like, oh yeah, I've been waiting for this one. So super excited about this one.
Pun intended.
Yeah. Super excited.
I mean, I will admit it does start off a little generic. There is some tie-in, but it's basically just him versus a bunch of inner gang agents that are in Apokolips tech suits. When he gets introduced, I don't know if we noticed this the first time, but I'm pretty sure that's the shot inspired by Kingdom Come, when he's holding the criminal in one hand.
Yeah.
So I was really watching this time in these 2 movies for a lot of homages, and some of them are not just to the Death of Superman storyline and the ones that follow it, but just kind of like his history. Like there's a lot of things in there, a lot of love letters to fans, which I appreciated because we're pretty far into this countdown, and Superman has been a good part of the story, the Justice League, but he's always been part of the ensemble.
Yeah.
The last time he was any kind of a focus was when he got possessed in Justice League versus Teen Titans.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was nice to see him get a couple of movies. Well, mainly this one, but as far as the subject matter, two movies that focus on him. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say what I liked is that in this one we actually they do stray from the original story, in that we actually get to see not the B or C team Justice League, but the Justice League actually involved in this, and it was just awesome. I was like, okay, this is what I wanted to see in the book. So as much as the original story was cool. It was like Guy Gardner and Fire and Ice and a bunch of people I'd never even heard of. I still have yet to resolve the mystery of who is Bloodwind in that story, in the original story. Like they left like that cliffhanger. Like, does anybody care who this guy is? But yeah, I was just like, what? So to see the Justice League actually go at it, all these heavy hitters that have been along this story, was absolutely amazing. When the fighty fight starts, that's when it gets really good. That's when I was just like, okay, it's on now.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the funny thing. And they actually, I made a note. They make an allusion to something that was happening at the time, that's just one of those things. Like, it was such a massive story. I think they probably would have had to get the editorial team on board maybe like a year in advance to tell them, hey, we're working towards this story. Where are all of your books going to be at this time?
Right.
And I think that's what it was. Is that they were like, well, this is who we have in our books right now. And like, what? Was it Gangbuster? Like what? Where did he come all of a sudden? So I think it was a little bit of that. Well, I'll just skip ahead to the main one that they alluded to, which is the whole Lex Luthor at the time was like a clone, and he was Alexander Luthor, and he had the long red hair, which they make fun of here when he has the scene in the elevator. So that, I appreciated that they made fun of stuff like that, but it was obvious that they didn't have that much, not so much the forethought, but more so the collaboration between all the books. This was still just Superman's story.
And speaking of clones, they got rid of a big character. I thought it was like, oh, wow. Originally I was expecting to see it, but Supergirl, her weird alien clone, I don't even know that story, but yeah, they even took her out of this. I was almost expecting some kind of homage to that, or like even a little inside joke or something, but no, we get absolutely nothing about why Supergirl with Lex Luthor, and it was just really weird. I just remember seeing that scene in the books and being like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, that was kind of the same way, especially having grown up with like the Super Friends and the Superman Christopher Reeve movies. You're like, this is not Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
But we have some nice moments where we see that Superman and Lois are together now, and at first it seems like they just kind of swept the whole Wonder Woman thing under the rug, but they do kind of come back around to it, and they actually have her and Wonder Woman address it later. So
well, he and Wonder Woman.
But it's one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, that's true. They do. That's one of those things where this story is way before the New 52. so this kind of has really nothing to do with the New 52. So they kind of had to take what they were going forward with, and then take elements from the Death of Superman story and kind of make them meld. And of course, in the original Death of Superman, him and Lois were together, and it's very vital that they be together. Otherwise, you'd really change up the ending. So at first it was a little jarring, but I was like, okay, I get it, and they kind of made sense. So
well, what I was going to say was I like how they kind of do this thing, and it's kind of something we've worked on. We've always been working on, I guess. It's the whole idea of, should I reveal my alter ego, my superhero ego to, family and friends and stuff like that, and what are the consequences? So I kind of like that even though originally when I watched it, it wasn't. I was just like, But watching it now is just like, okay, that's kind of cool. He's struggling. You got this guy who's literally the Man of Steel, and he's struggling. He even asks his friend, his closest friends, the Justice League, how do they deal with that? Because I think Barry says he's getting married. I'm not sure if that's in this one, but and so he even asked him, when did you tell her, and how did you do it, kind of thing. So it was kind of interesting to see that dynamic with someone, that can literally do almost anything, still have to struggle with this idea of like, should I include her, and what are the risks, and even like kind of like having to ask his friends, for advice on this. So it makes him an everyday person. I know everyone always says, well, how can you write Superman? He's so powerful and omnipotent almost. You can't kill him, kind of thing. Sadly here you can. But it was just interesting to see that dynamic play out in this story, and kind of see how even he has to deal with it. It's just it was good, and it made it interesting, and I actually enjoyed that more the second time around.
Yeah, and I think like we saw some good forethought too here with John Henry Irons. We saw him come out. Was it Justice League War that he had the
I
quick
think
cameo?
so. Yeah, it was really quick. I was trying to remember which one that was too. Yeah, but yeah, we see him.
But so that actually kind of worked out because he mentions it, and because I mean they've got to get through a lot of stuff here at the beginning really quick.
Yeah.
They've got to introduce him. They introduce Hank Henshaw as the astronaut in space, who loves Superman and believes that he'll always be there, for the human race and things like that. And then of course that is quickly messed up by the arrival of Doomsday,
Yeah.
Which takes out Hank and his crew, which includes his wife. Let's see here. I thought it was interesting because one of the things they played around with in the comics with Doomsday is that by the time we see him in the comics, he's already on Earth, and they do this really cool thing where there's a sound effect of the doom that's just like going through the entire comic until they get to the end.
Yeah, the narrative was really good on that. Like Doomsday is coming, and then boom, Doomsday is here, and you get that iconic fist through almost like the Superman logo cover that we saw, but he's busting to the ground. I remember reading it, and it's really funny. Like it's very nostalgic, and it was definitely a different time. Reading the book, and I've even revisited it a couple times because I like it. I just like to go back and read that one. I probably read that one more than most, but I just remember, I think this was '90s, early '90s or something like that the story broke. And I just remember like almost this, like, I don't want to say it was fear because I understand it's a comic book, but for it to elicit a response like from a book, this was the first time I felt like, I almost like watching a movie. It was the same thing. There was like this, like a horror movie, like you felt like this doom coming, no pun intended on that either, but this doom coming, like the foreboding of this character. And as you see him and you follow him in the book, all the stuff that he does, I mean, everything from just killing innocent animals to people, he literally cuts a path through the heart of America, on his way to Metropolis, and just to see the destruction that, he causes and stuff, and how easily he does it, and without any remorse or feeling or anything, and I think they did, they did kind of, I did kind of miss that in this one. They do a little bit. He does kill a couple innocents, including like a bear and some camping people. But I did kind of miss that from the story. I was just like, man, I wish they kind of took a little more time with him. But I think they just wanted to get to the fight. They just wanted to get to this point, because actually the second part of this movie was where it got really interesting. But it was interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah, I guess they were trying to tie it in again more, because this time he actually ends up at the bottom of the ocean, which at first I was like, oh, that's interesting, but then I was like, oh, wait, they're setting up for him to meet some Atlanteans, so that way, okay, these are not just regular people he's killing, these are actually, well-known warriors, which we've seen know how to fight and stuff like that. So, yeah. And of course it ties it back to this world. So I found it interesting there that they went that route. I also find it interesting that, by this point, Martian Manhunter and Hawkman are just part of the League. No explanation.
Yeah, and Shazam is nowhere to be heard of ever again. We'd never hear him ever again. Not even in the meetings. Nothing.
Yeah. So it's that's a little off-putting because, again, it's kind of like we said before. You kind of just have to decide to go rewatch everything before this one.
Yeah.
to appreciate it because you're just like when, just not to jump ahead real quick, but later on when Martian Manhunter's affected by some fire, you're like, okay, if you didn't know that about him, you'd be like,
Why
he's on
is that
fire.
happening? Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting. He was a really cool character, though. I liked him in this, even though he was kind of just thrown in there. He was cool, but I think they did a good job of just balancing a little bit with the ones we all know and just kind of their same character arc. They've kept that pretty consistent. Um, I will say this: I was thinking about it as you're talking. One thing I was kind of surprised with is generally when they do these stories, they tend to mimic the original artwork of the original books, or at least some part of the storyline. So, like, Jim Lee did it; they drew it a certain way. If so and so did it, so this one I was really interested because I wanted to see the translation of the art with Dan Jurgens. He did the original artwork on I believe he was the artist on the books on Death of Superman, and in this they absolutely did not do anything to homage his work. And I don't know where that stopped. I guess I didn't notice it until this one because, again, I was looking forward to this one like a lot. And so when I was watching, I was like, you know what? They don't really do. And a matter of fact, I don't even know if they did any homages to any of the work he did in that book, which I'm super familiar with. There's like certain people that are born to draw certain characters. I think Jim Lee has got Batman. For me, Dan Jurgens is the guy for Superman. If you look at his work, he's the iconic artwork, and you've seen his stuff all over in a lot of commercial stuff and everything. He's kind of a really big influence on the artwork. So I was a little surprised. Just a side note that I wanted to mention on this is like they kept it traditional to what they've been doing, which really works. Not complaining. It looked amazing, but I was really surprised they didn't really change it for this story. So I don't know why they went that direction. They still look great. They looked amazing, but I was curious. Just thought I'd mention it.
I think they were trying to keep the look more consistent with how they've looked in each one, because I don't think any of them have really changed their looks that bad, other than, like you said, with Suicide Squad, that she thought that some of the quality was down, but I still think that the characters fit in that world, despite all the other problems with that movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. I definitely like those two artists' interpretation as well. But mine actually goes a little bit more old school. I really like Kurt Swan's Superman. He's the one from like the 50s and the 60s, carries over a little bit into the 80s, and then I like Neil Adams' Batman.
Neil Adams is pretty good. Yeah, I'll give you that. No, they're good. Respectful, they're good. But for me, I don't know. I think because I came in at the time I did, I was like, man, this guy, as an artist, I was just like, man, this guy can draw Superman. He just gave him the bulk and build, and his panel, his storytelling, his story paneling was amazing. I absolutely fell in love with it, and he to me he's kind of like the Christopher Reeve of artists when it comes to Superman. Like, he's that for me. He's just so iconic. So, but again, I was surprised they didn't do it, but I get it too, because once they've got a formula, why mess with it, kind of thing. But and again, I can appreciate it. The art on this one, the time they took it, this love letter to Superman almost was, even though they kill him, was really well done and really well executed.
Yeah, because like next week we're gonna review Batman Hush, which I know is a Jim Lee story, and I never got to see that one, so I'll be curious to see if they change the style for that or not. I assume they probably keep it very similar to what we're seeing now. But yeah, you're right about this. This time is when the fight starts. It's basically the Justice League versus Doomsday, because Superman is away with Lois, right? Because I remember they were kind of building up that they were having issues, which I thought was interesting. It's so funny to I hope I find a picture of it, to see Lois standing next to Clark, and he's just so huge, and and she's actually into Clark in this one. That's another thing that was a little bit different.
Yeah. They don't have
she didn't know.
Yeah, which was interesting, and I love that they actually did the glasses thing, which I was just like, that's hilarious. It's like, Lois, look at me, and takes off the glasses. I was like, oh my god! So I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that part. It's silly, but it's an homage, man. It's just like, how do you not know this guy is Superman? But I do like the fact, and at first I thought she knew, because there's a scene where they're like in the supply closet or something talking, and he's like, you always get excited whenever you see him, and she's like, maybe I should buy you tights or something like that. So I thought, there was already like an inside joke, like she knew. So I was surprised when she didn't. And then just that reveal was great. I was just like, that's funny. Yeah, he's away with her on a date actually because he wants to tell her. Like I mentioned earlier, he was asking, when should I tell her? How should I tell her? Kind of thing. And his parents are going to be in town or something, so they're on a date at the time where he decides to finally tell her, and he passes her a note, which is his last secret, which plays into the next movie. But yeah, so go ahead. Sorry.
No, no. I think the only thing we kind of skipped over before we get into the fight here is that Superman, I guess he was trying to be more open with the world, and so he was going to start sharing some secrets about Kryptonian technology.
Mm-hmm.
And then he actually brings his original ship that brought him to Earth.
Yeah.
To Star Labs.
Star Labs, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was a nice homage because it's a design of the original ship,
Yeah.
However, as you'll find out later, they don't shy away from homaging the Christopher Reeve ideas too. So I don't really know how much to focus on this fight other than to say that the Justice League tries to hold their own. And of course, Doomsday is just tearing through them. I mean, a lot of this you really just gotta see. I mean, It's like it's pretty amazing. I mean, they do make Doomsday pretty unstoppable, which is appropriate, obviously. I will say, well, I don't know. We want to get into the origin of Doomsday in this one or the next one, probably. Probably the next one because they do change his origin, but it suits this world. And what the storyline we've been following, but
yeah. I mean, and again, I like the original. Like, I like his origin in the books. It was great. It was dark and twisted and stuff like that. And again, this is one of those things where I felt like they didn't. I don't think it translated as well because there was definitely something in his origin that made him so, I guess, believably terrifying and dreadful and really doom. Like, because from what I remember, he's like a genetic creature that was created by an alien race, and then he was like torn to pieces over and over, and basically in this kind of like forced mutation, forced what do they call it? Evolution almost, to where he got so powerful that he even killed his creators and stuff. And I mean, from what I remember, so. What we got was pretty cool. I love the idea of his suit, that he still had technically the green suit on, and you saw as he was being attacked piece by piece, it would, kind of reveal him, which was a slow reveal, which I love how they did in the book. It was kind of the same thing. You only got to see pieces of him, and then, when they finally reveal him, you're like, who is this dude? Unlike Bane, I really enjoyed this guy. I was like, oh, okay, this guy he looks like a viable threat. He didn't look like a luchador or something like that. Out of the blue. I hated that when I first saw Bane. But in this, the origin that they went with this, the story changes they made, I think it worked really well for this, and it was like, okay, cool, that's neat. I accept it. I enjoy it. And I was like, all right, let's see where this goes.
It was actually Kryptonians who did that to Doomsday. That's why he hated Superman so much.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a pretty wicked. It's one of my favorite origins for a villain because it's just so messed up.
Yeah.
Like you said, they basically would make a Doomsday baby. They would send it out into the wilderness. It would die. They would collect the DNA. They do it again and again. And that's why it was hard to kill him, because in his DNA, he was designed to keep surviving, basically. And it was their fault. Yeah.
They just evolve and mutate. Yeah. And I remember I was like, oh my gosh, this is dark, man. This is really dark. But yeah, so I mean, I kind of missed that in this one. You didn't have that background. Really, what I was going off was what I know from it. So I was just curious how maybe someone like you said who hasn't been following along this whole time was like, why is this guy so powerful? But if nothing else, it gets you interested in finding out more about who Doomsday is, because as we know, this isn't the last time we see him. So he was a really interesting character that kind of it answered the whole thing. It's like, how do you stop Superman? Everyone's like, oh man, you can throw a nuke at him, you can do this and do that, and you won't stop him. But to actually have something, a force of almost nature, genetic force of nature, just come and beat him at his own game almost is pretty remarkable. And I was like, okay, so for every the opposites, every here there's a villain, and this was definitely the answer. Instead of Lex's mind, you've got just brute hate and force, and strength that actually could go toe to toe with Superman and actually make him bleed, and ultimately kill him, which was really, I guess, why it was so shocking, such a big story.
Yeah, they literally beat each other to death. So what happens in the original? There's a little bit of a different resolution here.
Yeah,
Um,
but the fight is good.
but
The fight is amazing.
yeah, I mean, it takes them all through Metropolis. It's actually Lois who gives him the name Doomsday. She just kind of says it, while they're filming. And of course, Perry White goes with it. So
Yeah,
it's just one of those quick little things. Um, Another homage to the Christopher Reeve is whenever they reverse it, right? Because he
yeah,
saves Lois, and
the helicopter.
yeah, it's like, you've got me. Who's got you?
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite scenes from that original Christopher Reeve movie.
Oh yeah, that was definitely a nice homage there.
I keep forgetting that it's Rainn Wilson. Uh,
As Lex Luthor,
yeah,
yeah, that's crazy. It's so funny because if you know Rainn Wilson from The Office, I just kept seeing this one character he played, but like to the extreme. Because if you know Rainn Wilson's character in The Office as Dwight, I mean, he is a perfect choice for Lex Luthor. It's really weird hearing him because I'm so used to the other guy voicing him, and I can't remember his name right now, but it's just like this ultimate power. I saw him. It's so funny. I saw his Megamind character kind of mixed up with his Recyclops character from The Office. Honestly, this maniacal guy who actually does have the resources and money that Dwight never had in The Office. But to see him, with all these and the intelligence, it was just like, oh man, this guy's perfect. And it's still kind of sniveling. It's still kind of like, this guy is very he is striving so hard to get the city to love him, and he hates Superman with every being in his body. So it's just funny to see this. It's perfect casting for him. I mean, I don't think they could have gone with a better choice for this. I forget when they changed it. I know it was a couple movies back, but yeah, he was fantastic as Lex.
yeah, and he really gets to shine in this one. He even tries to go against Doomsday, and I guess a almost like a RoboCop 2 version of his green suit,
Yeah,
which I actually did not like that design.
yeah, it was. I don't know. I kind of felt they were borrowing a lot from the '90s on that one, maybe that was the intent because it just oozed '90s. The whole design. I was like, now that you mentioned, and even some of the other ones you see in the background, that I guess his prototypes or whatever. So yeah, but I like the RoboCop 2 reference. That is kind of funny because it's true. He's got the big face on the screen thing. That was funny.
Oh, speaking of his prototypes, we did get a cameo early of what's going to end up being Superboy when we go into his lab, and it's interesting because he's wearing in the test tube he's wearing the New 52 suit that they gave him, which is that weird black and
red
red thing. So that was nice. I'm glad that they didn't keep that. I was never a fan of that suit.
I actually liked it. That's funny.
Because it's just meant to be like an experimental thing.
Yeah, I kind of saw it like the black suit Superman was later. It was more of an absorption suit, even though I don't think they ever actually make that point. I kind of felt it was supposed to be something that helped him absorb the radiation or something from the sun. I don't know. I don't know what their point with that was.
Well, the thing is, because in going with the New 52 ideas, they actually tied him to the Teen Titans, or some of the Teen Titans, and then another group they call the Ravagers, which had some members of the Titans, but they were all part of that group called the Hive, and I think Brother Blood was the one that was in control of all of them. They all had those suits. They just had different color schemes. So there was some relevance to that in the New 52.
Yeah. We do. I was gonna say we do get a nod to the Teen Titans in this as well. I mean, it's just a quick one, but it's like, oh, the Teen Titans got this, and Barry's like, or the Flash is like, oh, great, whatever. He's just like the Teen Titans. But I like that they did that. You even see Damian makes a small cameo in this as well. Later, I think in the second one, or at the end of this one, I can't remember.
No, it's the end of this one. But yeah, and that shows some nice continuity. So during that Lex versus Doomsday, the Hall of Justice gets destroyed.
Yeah.
And when Superman and Doomsday finally trade killing blows, he actually basically snaps Doomsday's neck by twisting it completely around, but by flying at him at super speed. But then here's where, surprisingly, they actually take the idea from the Batman versus Superman live action
Yep.
to where he gets stabbed in the middle of that. Because I don't know if you, well, yeah, you said you've read it several times. The famous scene of the killing blow
Yeah.
in Death of Superman,
Yeah.
it's when they both hit each other simultaneously.
Yeah, I mean, they're hitting each other
Um,
so hard that glass is shattering and causing like these huge waves of what would you call those, like sonic booms almost, to where they are affecting all kinds of mayhem around Metropolis. And again, in the book, they did a really cool job of like, you've got all these people watching this fight going on. They're sheltering, but I mean, his whole thing is like, this is my city, and this is where it stops. This is where I draw the line. And they build up this crescendo. It's such a good job of like, you're seeing Superman fighting for his life and fighting for Metropolis. And I mean, you get these amazing, amazing panels of him and Doomsday just hitting each other. This is basically Who Wants It More, kind of almost Rocky, esque type fight where it's just a straight up. There's no more technique to it. It's just Superman throws everything at him that he has and just hits him and hits him, and Doomsday just keeps answering it. And that last shot where you just see him boom, and there's this big shockwave or whatever, and they both fall. Very dramatic, and I missed that from this, from being in this one, but it was still kind of a cool, in this one, Lois is basically protecting Superman at this point. She's throwing rocks at Doomsday, and it was funny because Norma was having to watch this scene, and she's like, "Why isn't Lois like do anything, like run away or something?" I was like, "There's no way she's gonna run away." I mean, yeah, that she can get away from Doomsday. I'm like, she literally. I mean, this was a desperate. I almost thought they were gonna do like where people kind of, besides just Lois, like people came in and tried to protect Superman, which actually would have been kind of interesting, but futile. But it would have maybe kind of given that same kind of gravitas to this death scene. But they probably for cost and time, they just had Lois do it, obviously, because that's what they've been building to. She's just found out who he is. She just learns a secret, which was that he loves her. All this stuff, so it lent to the story. But I did miss that in this. I wanted to see that same, like, you have to read the book if you enjoy this. Check out the book. It's amazing. This scene alone. But yeah, that final blow, he hits Doomsday, head gets twisted around, which is really cool. And yeah, I kind of thought it was like, okay, with him getting stabbed. I was like, eh.
yeah, definitely check out this book. Just kind of skim over the characters that you don't know.
Yeah,
but,
and let me know if you find out who Bloodwind is, because I need to know. I really don't.
But here, at the end, they definitely capture some of the famous imagery from the comics, like Superman and Lois's arms, his cape flowing like a flag on the pole. Later on during his funeral, they have the gold statue with the eagle on his shoulder. So lots of great imagery in this one, and yeah, that's where the real quick non-speaking moment with Damian and Batman at Wayne Manor, which was really nice. Again, definitely means that much more after following those characters for the last several movies, because it obviously really affected Batman.
Well, and it was. I was going to say, it was interesting because there's a part in here where, as the League is falling, Batman actually calls out. Well, he doesn't call out to him, but he does actually. It's weird to see Batman ask for any help. So for him to say, and not only Superman, he says, "Clark, we need you." And I was just like, "Oh man!" Like that gave me chills because I was like, "Well, Batman doesn't call anybody," but he realized just how dire the situation was, and for him to call him by his friend name, not his superhero, whatever he called him Clark, which I thought was huge. I was just like, "Oh wow!" So that did give some weight to the situation, and I was like, "Oh, that was pretty cool."
Yeah, that was when they were collecting the fallen Justice League members and lining them against that wall.
Yeah. I was like, "Holy moly!" That was pretty cool. I thought Green Lantern did kind of fall kind of quickly, though. I was like, "Come on!" I was like, he could have done more, but anyways, he tried.
So then, towards the end, as the movie's ending, we have the rocket ship that they were studying activates and leaves. We get some interesting religious imagery here with
Yep.
Superman's tomb being empty. So I
Yep.
thought that was interesting. We even get that one guy, the sailor. He recites
Bibbo.
Our Father.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. That was different.
Um,
I did like how Lex kind of gave his little speech, at the end. And you see Wonder Woman looking at him. It's like he's basically. They even credit him with giving Superman time to stop Doomsday, which wasn't the case. But it's interesting to see. That's what the world saw, But we get to see the inside the story. Like we know what's really going on. And honestly, he was there because he wanted all the praise for stopping Doomsday. And so even when he's being ripped out of his suit, he's just like no. And Superman goes and actually saves him. He's about to get killed, and he gets saved by Superman. And then, Superman goes and does this thing. He's screaming at the top of his lungs that it's supposed to be me, that stopped. I'm supposed to be the city's savior. So I liked that they still went with that they still use that, and it carries throughout the next movie. But yeah, I was just like that part where I was like, oh man, that's pretty crazy. And when he's talking about how I enjoyed our late night chats and stuff like that, and you see Wonder Woman giving this ugly look, and it was interesting.
yeah, forever the snake.
Yep.
So the post credits, we actually get what are there? 4 of them. We get Superboy escaping the lab, and he actually grabs the jacket, which is his famous leather jacket look from the 90s.
Yeah, and I missed this because I watched that one that was called The Death and Return of Superman. So in that one, they don't show the post credit scene, which I thought was interesting. It goes straight from the tomb scene and the scene where you see this Superman or whatever in the air, and Lois is like, "Oh my God!" He flies off. That's where that one actually just picks up. So interesting. I didn't know they did the post.
Oh, so they made a version of this where they just connected them?
Yeah. It's one straight movie. It's just called The Death and Return of Superman. That's the one I watched.
Oh, okay. Huh. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just basically do that. They showed John Henry Irons forging his suit. They show the rocket ship that actually goes and uses one of the crystals, which they did introduce the crystals early on, and makes the Fortress of Solitude, but it's the Fortress of Solitude from the Christopher Reeve movies.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So that was a nice crisscrossing of the worlds. We also get to see at the very end of the credits, we see Cyborg Superman fly towards the camera, and then they do the bloody S as they end the credits. So
okay. I'm gonna go back to watch that version.
Yeah, so I thought that was a nice homage. But this one for me, ratings 1 out of 10. I'm just going to give it a solid 8 out of 10. I just really enjoyed it so much more this time after seeing all these movies, which I think speaks to the fact that, you probably have to watch all these to really appreciate this, is fitting into this overarching story. And, you do appreciate characters more when you get to see them more than just one movie.
Yeah,
So what about you?
Yeah, I'll give this an 8 out of 10 as well. Again, it's like the first half, I get what they were doing. They're building it up, but I wanted to get to the meat of the story. And honestly, for that, it was the fight. I almost wish the fight was longer with the Justice League, but then again, Doomsday was that powerful that I really don't see how they could have. Maybe just by showing more footage, because a lot of it, you just see them get taken out within seconds of fighting. But and that's what I do enjoy about this is like even the fight between Wonder Woman and Doomsday is pretty epic. But just to show how powerful he is and how quickly he takes her out was really interesting. And just seeing how he used basically all his willpower and still failing. I just wanted to see more of that instead of this kind of. It was like 75% build up to this story, which I guess was the point because it is everybody knows who Superman is, that he can fight. So they really seem to concentrate more on who is Superman, what is he when he's not with the cape, basically, and then you got like 25% of the fight of the story or whatever. So I kind of wish they did more of that. I almost felt like they had to shorten that just for money, like budget and time. But it was a really cool fight. I just wish it had been a little longer. So yeah, I'd give this a 8 out of 10. It was really enjoyable. I'd watch it again.
Yeah, especially now. So let's move on to the next one. So like you said, there's a version of this that combines the two, but the standalone, which is simply called Reign of the Supermen, which is a direct pull from the titles of that time when the story was coming out, which that was actually where I got to jump in the comics. I remember getting each of the 4 different covers, which I'll show here.
Hmm.
Um,
And they include
that
them in the cartoon. At least one of them.
hmm Yeah, so where you could get, because I think there was 2 versions of it. There was one where there's just like a cutout of the different logos, and then you could get one that actually showed the character,
Right.
because each of the 4 characters, which we'll just go over here because they set them up pretty early, and a lot of them, of course, are just carrying over from what we just learned. So of course you've got Superboy. With his 90s look, which
Yeah.
I'm glad they kept that because
Yeah.
I don't know, I think it's cool, and it went with his character here. He's a
Yeah.
lot more snarky, and he almost reminded me of kind of like a Beast Boy,
Yep.
but
Yeah.
you
He's
know,
basically a Teen Titans Superman or Superboy.
yeah,
Yeah. I like. Well, first of all, I have to say they updated their costumes, even though they're nice homages to the book. I still liked how they kept that '90s appearance to them and all their art styles that they did on these their designs and stuff. So yeah.
yeah, because there's a lot that happens in here that you could tell they were like, okay, we're just going to keep this, even though it's very 90s looking.
Yeah.
um, And of course, we have Steel in his full-on armor. We have the Eradicator, and then of course we have Cyborg Superman.
Mm-hmm.
They reference a lot of the titles. One that they didn't reference, which is a famous title in between there, is called "Funeral for a Friend," but they did reference the titles "World Without Superman."
Mm-hmm.
When Perry White's talking to everybody, I couldn't remember if this was like just from the Superman Christopher Reeve movies, but Perry White yelling out "Great Caesar's Ghost." I don't remember if that's like how far back that goes.
That's like original.
You know?
Well, and it's funny because that goes back from like the maybe even the black and white episodes with gosh, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank here. The other Reeve that played him. I think it goes back that far. I feel horrible because I can't remember his name. Anyways, but yeah,
George
but even
Reeve.
thank you. But the Reign of the Superman, interesting that they went with this name because that's actually from the original story when they first created Superman. There was a story called Reign of the Supermen, which actually was more about Lex Luthor. But that's kind of where it originated from, and I thought that was kind of neat that they did this for this story, just to have that history pulled into which they've been doing this whole time. And it was subtle. I mean, it was just like little things here, little things there. So, like you had mentioned earlier, the line from Superman with Christopher Reeve, and then just a Fortress of Solitude. So, just kind of that title was perfect. Was my point. I was just like, man, that's pretty cool that they dug that deep. But yeah, the Great Caesar Ghost. I want to say it goes back to the George Reeves Superman episodes, if not further, even to the radio broadcast. I think it's pretty old.
Yeah, and see that's what I loved about both these movies. I mean, they were just pulling from all kinds of things. Like the next one I was going to mention is after Wonder Woman and Lois, have their nice little talk together about the whole relationship thing. Wonder Woman transforms like the 1970s Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
So just little things like that. I mean, especially if you're a longtime fan of all this stuff like we are, it's just nice because I guess it reminds you that there's still other people who remember all this, and hopefully for newer viewers, it gives you Easter eggs to go back and learn about.
Yeah.
So let's see here. So they have to get all these characters together pretty quick because again, there's so much in here. Because I feel like in the comics, obviously, each of these characters had a while by themselves.
Yeah, they
but
kept you guessing like who is the real Superman, and that was kind of the thing. Is like who really is Superman? Like is this or which one of these people is Superman? They present their cases and stuff like that. I think they did a good job marketing it. It was just like it definitely sold more books, and everybody wanted to see the return. And I think if we can talk about it real quick, I think actually at one point they say this, and I've seen documentaries where they're like, no, we never for Superman to be dead. This was just a marketing thing we're trying to do or whatever. But I mean, at the time, I don't remember hearing any of that, which I guess was the point. Like they were honestly trying to kill Superman so they could bring in a new hero or something like that. And I guess it was motivated by his sales were really low, and or just comic books in general were suffering. People just weren't buying them as much. I remember being like an all-time low, and this really, I think, invigorated the industry. And I mean, it was a huge boom, and as a lot of people learned later, it just didn't pay off as far as what they were investing into it, unfortunately. But we did get a great story out of this, something very iconic and historical and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, so I did enjoy those stories where they would do that, like who is Superman, and they kind of play with that throughout this second part of it. You see the interactions, like how basically kind of trying to prove their case, I guess, like, oh, I am Superman, or I am for this reason or that reason. So that was interesting.
Yeah, because what is it? Is it a Luthor-led event that Lois is trying to find out information, and that's when basically all of them come together. The Eradicator,
Yeah,
Superboy, Steel, Cyborg, Cyborg, Superman. I mean, they all come together and just have this big fight. And of course, it's funny because Superboy, he was made by Luthor, so Luthor's kind of like this like abusive dad, basically.
he
Like,
gets really creepy in this one.
yeah,
Like, I don't know, man. It just felt squeamish, almost like the way he would talk to his lab guy, his tech, whatever he was, his geneticist. That was weird. It's like he was beating on him. Like, it was just weird. And then like with Superboy, the whole father thing, and you're half me, half Superman. I was just weirded out by that. But again, it was perfect for Rain to play the part. It was just, I don't know, it was uncomfortable.
yeah, but it definitely made him interesting, and I mean, I'm glad because they that character, the Superboy character, kind of could have gotten real annoying real quick, and it's funny because they almost do that on purpose at the
Yeah,
beginning, and then he kind of apologizes for it later.
yeah.
So
I did love his kind of his little like his little what do they call those, like where they show a bunch of scenes like real quick with no audio.
oh, the montage.
Montage, thank you. Yeah, and they show him. He does. I even took a picture of it, but it shows him he's online and he's doing a toy unboxing of his own character, which I thought was great because they do show a lot of like updates to the story, and I thought it was interesting because there's still newspapers in this time, and I don't even know if newspapers exist anymore. I assume they do, but the fact that they still, like, there were headlines, and you would see like we mentioned earlier, you see Steel from the famous cover or whatever that that first shows him. It's on a newspaper, and then there's even scenes where like Superman's flying by, or like one of them's flying by, and there's newspapers. I thought that was kind of funny, but they still updated the stuff. Everyone's got iPhones now. A lot of the stuff is being, it's definitely technology now. So I thought that was interesting, having to make that leap into current times, but that they still kept a lot of the stuff that you saw in the books. It's still relevant, I guess, in this world.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation because like the Daily Planet is supposed to be more of like a multimedia place because it's not just the newspaper. Because like Cat Grant is in this one,
Mm-hmm.
um, and when she's giving her monologues, it's on TV.
Yeah.
But then they have newspapers too. So yeah, that is a nice marriage of the new and the old. Um, the Justice League, of course, they're all still around. So they are trying to carry on with life, and one of the things they get tasked to do is to do a presidential escort to the new watchtower, which I feel like they've been teasing for a while now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then this is where we find out that that Cyborg Superman is actually a tool of Darkseid,
Right.
and at some point in there, you also find out that Doomsday was sent by Darkseid. So I was like okay with it, I guess, just because again they're just trying to tie all this together
Yeah.
in this particular timeline. So I was fine within that respect. Because I don't think that that Darkseid had anything to do with this storyline at all, not even in any like later revelations.
Yeah.
So, but somebody makes the point. They were like, "Yeah, when you announced that Superman was dead, you basically painted a target on the Earth, so of course that's basically what happens. Like, Darkseid tries to attack again. A gate opens, more parademons. But then it's interesting that I don't know if he planned it this way or what, but it seems like the gate literally just falls on the Justice League.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That was.
I knew right away it was just gonna zap them away somewhere. But of
Yeah.
course the world thinks they're dead.
Yeah. We needed.
Um,
This was like Avengers before Avengers kind of return thing. I almost feel like they were inspired by this. this particular scene.
Well, I felt like the writers were like, "How do we get rid of the Justice League so we can just focus
Yeah,
on the Supermen?"
a wizard did it. Yeah. Yeah, well, it was interesting because we kind of, and this was where, to me, I like again, I've read the books, and it seems a lot more political in the books, as to the motivation of Hank Henshaw and the Cyborg Superman, and that one, it's his own. Now, and I'm trying to remember it now because I've read it so many times, but I don't remember him being tied to Darkseid or anything. It was his own motivations that were causing this, but yeah, like in this one, I thought it was really. I didn't. I'll say this: I didn't like what they were doing with this, with the whole giving other like just regular people superpowers. It was this whole theme of be your own superhero, your own Superman. Don't rely on superheroes. You see like little news segments where people are like, enough of the superheroes. Let's be our own superheroes, kind of thing. And it just kind of seemed out of the blue to me. I was like, why? There's like this backlash for no reason. I would understand if maybe something catastrophic had happened, where there was like all these lawsuits or something from people that were hurt during the Doomsday Superman thing. But it just seemed kind of like they just threw it in there, and all of a sudden everybody's an anti-superhero or something, and they wanted to be their own superhero. So the motivation just kind of seemed like it came out of nowhere on that. So, and I didn't like the whole idea of these people just getting these tech suits, and I don't know. It just seemed kind of really like, let's hurry up and finish the story kind of thing. We need to get rid of just like, boom, okay, we'll drop the thing on them, and we need to have some kind of some threat or whatever. So boom, let's make these guys superheroes, because none of that doesn't happen in the books, from what I remember, and it just seemed kind of almost rushed at the end there. So yeah, you can literally just skip this, I guess.
Oh no, I think they were trying to shoehorn in another idea that I want to say is from the book that's just simply called 52. I think that's where it's from, because there was, I want to say, something where Lex Luthor was giving people powers or something like that, and that they had another homage to this idea of the reign of the Superman, but they were spelling it like this, but literally, whenever he enacts his plan, there are superpowered beings raining down from the sky, and it's Luthor's fault. So I feel like this was kind of a weird homage to that, because it just seemed very familiar. I remember that idea. But I mean, yeah, I can see what you're talking about, but maybe a few extra scenes, like you said, that showed that the citizens were upset, kind of like the whole people about the Man of Steel
Like almost like the
fight
Incredibles
with him.
story,
Yeah,
something like that.
but I was gonna say like Superman versus Zod and Man of Steel, where people are like, yeah, they basically just destroyed half of Metropolis trying to fight each other, and then that's why Batman is upset with him in the next movie,
Yeah.
So, Lois Lane sure figured out who Steel was real quick, even though she didn't know who Superman was.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Like I could literally tell. Like, and I thought it was funny with him because I did like the Iron Man homage to his armor. That was kind of cool. And he walked in and all his stuff comes off. And again, this is pre-Iron Man, so I wonder how much of this. I think it is, right? Is this pre-Iron Man?
Well, the original story is this is not. This movie's from 2018, so it's 10 years after Iron Man debuted.
Oh, okay. So then I guess it was an Iron Man ripoff though. But it was cool. I mean, how his armor all just kind of came off as he walked through. That was interesting. I did like the fact that I guess they had to do this, but his mouth moved in the armor, and I was like, wait, that's armor. It's like,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And I was watching. I'm like, wait a minute, how the hell is he doing that? Like his face is moving. But I guess for animation, I would think they would actually not do that to save cost and time. They would have just left it flat and made it almost robotic or something. Or synthetic, like voice or something. That was interesting. I do have to say, of the designs, the updates, my favorite probably was Eradicator. His new look, as simple as the adjustments were, was my favorite design. Just awesome design. I loved it. Still with the goggles, very 90s, but they just changed up enough on the suit to update it. But it really stood out, and I liked his story. Steel was pretty much Steel. I don't think they actually did anything different with him other than give him that cool Iron Man transition. And then, obviously, like we mentioned earlier, the Superboy. And then Cyborg Superman has so many iterations. This one was cool. Not my favorite, but still pretty cool. Definitely the mech stuff was pretty neat.
Yeah, so about this point in the movie, like you were talking about the Eradicator, we find out that he's kind of like a program that's supposed to be protecting the
Hmm.
original Superman, who we find has been regenerating inside that original ship in
Yeah.
the Fortress of Solitude. And it's actually Steele who goes to the fortress and finds this out. And then here's where we get the epitome of the '90s when
Yeah.
Superman comes out of that ship with with his black suit, long black hair,
His
five
mullet.
o'clock shadow, and a big gun on his back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, it's like Cable Superman. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they justify it by saying he's depowered, basically. He's not fully powered, but still, I was like, really? Really? I almost felt like they could have given him some kind of Kryptonian armor or something like that, like we see later on. Would have been pretty neat. Actually, I think would have been a better, uh, and I don't know if they do that in the book. I'm trying to remember if they did that in the book, but I almost felt like they could have just put him in a suit, almost like a steel suit, Kryptonian armor of some kind. Would have been interesting, a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, well, like I said, they were probably just trying to stick to the actual reference of what he looked like at that time.
Yeah, that's fine.
So let's see here. So Darkseid actually gets foiled pretty quickly
Yeah,
by
that was
Cyborg Superman.
fast.
Yeah, and he's actually Darkseid is actually voiced by Tony Todd, good old Candyman. Um,
Oh, okay. I thought it was Andrew Brower from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think Captain Holt, that actor, played him before in one of the other Superman movies, the McGinnis style one with Supergirl. Um, but yeah, I was trying to figure him out the whole time. I didn't look him up though. But yeah, that was perfect. That's good.
no, I waited till the credits. I kind of feel like his voice could have used some sort of modulation or something over it because it just kind of sounded like Tony Todd. Just it's just him.
Yeah, I liked it. I
So,
thought it was good.
but
Yeah, that resolution was so fast. Like, Wizard did it. Okay.
yeah, and then Luther during this big battle at the Watchtower, helps bring the League back because it's like, okay, we can let you guys back in the story now.
Yeah.
So, but that's when he has again. I think it's the homage to the whole reign of Supermen. When they get deactivated, they start falling from the sky.
Oh yeah. I was
Yeah,
surprised they didn't do anything. Like I don't know if they could have been saved afterwards, but they just watched the Justice League just watched them fall to their deaths. Which I was waiting for Green Lantern to start like using a baseball glove thing and like collecting people, but they just watch them fall and die. I was just like, whoa, that's uncharacteristic. I was like, what in the world?
well,
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. I was just kind of happy that it wasn't reversible real easy. It's kind of like one of those, get to the end of the movie and then all the stuff just magically fall off them and they're like, we're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and again, we see
So,
the trope of once the main thing is taken down, kind of Star Wars esque, that they are hell bent on using for the rest of our lives now in movies. I'm waiting for a new ending, but you see, once Cyborg Superman, jumping ahead, gets defeated, everyone starts falling. Like I guess he's like the main, kind of whatever. And I was just like, oh, okay, all right.
yeah, so, I mean, it just to kind of wrap this up here.
Yeah,
So basically, once they're in the Watchtower launches in space with Lois, Superman, and Cyborg Superman, and Cyborg Superman is getting the upper hand because, like you said earlier, Superman is depowered, but then Lois is actually able to lower the shields once they're in space. So I guess all the sunlight he can start absorbing it and get his full power back. So that was pretty cool. Let's see, from what I remember, because I just pretty much stopped taking notes at this point because I'm like, okay, it's ending. Cyborg is defeated. Is he? Are we supposed to be dead? Sometimes with these movies, it's like, are they dead, or are they just dead? It's
well, that
like,
was an interesting. It was kind of an interesting death for him. I kind of liked it. It was definitely different from the story, and I actually enjoyed this ending better because the way he defeats Cyborg Superman. We do get some anime tentacle action, which was kind of, but not the bad way. We get some of that kind of action in this, where we see Superman basically is just dodging all these tentacles that Cyborg Superman is throwing at him, and he basically runs up or flies up to him and stabs him in the head with one of those crystals we mentioned earlier
oh
from the
yeah,
fortress. And it's a program. It's the Eradicator, and he puts it inside his head and almost basically just hacks him to death. So I don't think he's dead. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again, especially with the story coming up with the I guess the pendulum story here. I kind of think we're going to see Cyborg Superman again. But it was a cool death. They basically show Hank Henshaw back at the grave of his wife, which they kind of alluded to earlier, that revealed that he was not Superman. And basically he just comes out and it's like a 90s line. I forget what he says to him, like, oh, you've just been deleted or something. I forget what he calls it, or eradicated. You've just been eradicated. And he takes him out. But it was a cool death. It was kind of a cool, different. And I like that they didn't kill off that character, because in the story, in the book, the Eradicator is wiped out, basically. And it really sucked. He had a horrible death, and I was like, oh man, I really like that character. He was really kind of a Batman-esque Superman. Like if Batman was Superman almost, but I think he actually killed in the books, if I'm not mistaken. Eradicator that's why they called him that. Is he would kill the any villain or bad guy or whatever evildoer. So that was definitely something they held back on this. But yeah, it was a better death or a better ending, I thought, for his character. So I'm sure we'll see Cyborg Superman again.
So at the end of the credits, we have the Justice League kind of discussing that maybe it's time to take the fight to the dark side. So it's kind of the setup for Apokolips War, even though we have 2 more movies before we even get there.
Yeah.
And then Lex just interrupts the meeting on the Watchtower.
Who left the door open? That was pretty good, and that was definitely Rainn Wilson right there, man. I was like, that was Dwight all the way right there when he just walks in. What does he say? What does he tell him? He tells Louis
something about
like, when do we leave, or something like that. Yeah, and I was just like, yeah, and that was hilarious. I thought that was a great ending for that.
So for this one, I was struggling, but I think you kind of convinced me just to take it down a notch. I think I'm going to settle on a 7 out of 10, just because, there's probably a lot more in this that wasn't as solid as Death of Superman was. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm just going to settle on that. What about you?
I want to give it an 8 just for the art direction. Again, I really, really enjoyed what they did with the costumes. It was nostalgic enough, man. But 7.5 maybe. There was enough to hurt it that I was just like, man, I really wish. The whole time I'm thinking, I kind of wish they did this. I kind of wish they did that. So I found myself out of the movie like, why did they do that? Why did what's with these generic? For me, the big one was these weird Supermen, these other characters that were so generic, like CGI. They're basically Gungans and Droidicas. Basically, it's just like, or droids. They're like, who cares? There's this army building that they did. Was just, they were so not important that I just didn't care. You could kill them and it was like, eh. But and then the way they resolved the dark side thing was just way too fast, way too convenient. They've been building up to this, and I know what they're doing ultimately, but it was like, oh, they're coming, and then it was like, oh, okay, threat's gone. So it kind of dropped the ball in that. I guess for this one, I guess I will give it a 7 ultimately. Overall, though, both stories combined I give it an 8, but like the Death and Return, but it just had a lot of little plot holes and story. I don't know, that could have been done, I think, better. They had a lot to pull from, so I kind of felt like it was really rushed in the end.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It really is such a big story to pull from, so I think they did good considering. So, but anyway, so again, another hour video. So thank you guys who have hung in there with us. So we're almost there. We've got one more part of the countdown, and then after that we'll actually get to Apokolips War. So thanks to those of you who've subscribed so far. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. We're actually getting a steady group of new subscribers, so do appreciate that. Thank you guys so much. If you haven't checked out Roy's Toy Box, the links are below. Check out all his cool toy photography. Yeah, all the Supermans.
This is like not even a quarter of what I have. Like, this is a teeny tiny. This is the tip of the iceberg of what I have. So as you can see behind me, so lots of toys, tons of toys.
So anyway, thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next time.